Greetings, everyone. I am Shakina, the Neurodisruptor, and I'm back again with another video on politics and prophecy with Shakina. And today I just wanted to talk about Dr. Jordan Peterson. I've been following Dr. Jordan Peterson for years, and for a long time I respected his work. I learned a lot from him, particularly about how to think in high pressure situations. So I learned a lot from him, and then also the importance of analyzing Disney movies from the perspective of the human psyche. I got a lot of my insight on that area from him, and so for that I'm grateful. But I just want to say that I am extremely disappointed in how he's formed this cult-like following around him, and the beginning of his platform, he did not use his platform to glorify God at all, and he's now starting to do it. But it's like the sacrifice that he made, he's making it seem as if though he's been sacrificed, that his work is sacrificial, and everything that he's going through at U of T and all those other things are, woe is me, I'm a victim. And it's like, I just think it's so inappropriate for a white man to monopolize and capitalize on that conversation without also acknowledging how, Black women, Indigenous women, Afro-Indigenous women, racialized women, how they are severely abused, within the university context. I think it's inappropriate of him. I think it's actually scientific of him as well. I think it's very ignorant. I think it demonstrates that he has no real understanding of the depths of the oppressive systems that underpin the university structure and the university model of governance, right? He's completely ignorant of that. And I just think that it's so inappropriate that, he could take it upon himself to really capitalize on this narrative, which he's acting as if though he created, and he didn't create this narrative. The thing is Jordan Peterson was created. He's not a man of his own making, right? He is a polar opposite of a narrative that was created long before he came along, right? And was actually upheld by different people way before he came along. So in that regard, he needs to also acknowledge the narrative within which he is operating, right? And who really created that narrative and brought that narrative to that place where he, as a white man, could even have a platform like that, discussing the topics that he discusses, right? Because he acts as if though he created this platform on his own, and he didn't. Somebody who really created a platform on their own is somebody who created the narrative that upholds that platform. And what I mean by narrative is the spirit, right? The spirit. And Jordan Peterson did not create the spirit behind his platform. And I can assure you of that, because I can tell you right now that a lot of his work is completely irrelevant. And a lot of the things that he says are completely irrelevant. Right? And why is it irrelevant? Because the narrative that he was being empowered by is also unraveling and becoming irrelevant. And so I think Jordan Peterson has the potential to really delve deep into God's work and God's wisdom and God's teachings, right? And really delve deep into it. But I don't think that his position in this area right now anyway would be that of authority, right? I would argue that Jordan Peterson does not have any authority in God's kingdom. I can tell you that for a fact, because I didn't see him anywhere when I was running FemCare Community Health Initiative. Right? And you guys are probably like, oh, why is everything about your company? And it's like, well, I'm telling you that I'm a Judeo-Christian prophetess. I'm telling you that I was sent here to the West. I'm here to transform the world, and I have transformed the world. And there's written, documented evidence of that I have transformed the world. And there's years of documentation of that. And there's all these other people who are claiming to be me, who have not achieved the feats that I've achieved, right? And it's like, you can go ahead and make YouTube videos as much as you want, calling yourself God's begotten daughter, calling yourself the bride of Christ, calling yourself whatever the hell you want to call yourself. That's fine. I'll tell you right now that I used to work as a psych nurse. If I tell you the things that my patients used to say, and I had to go along with it, sometimes I just had to go along with it because that's what would allow that patient to sleep at night. To see what I'm saying? And sometimes it was more important for me to ensure that my patient with mental health issues got a good night's rest over me trying to debate with my patient about, their grandiose delusions and how they're out of touch with reality, right? So that's part of the wisdom of my position and my role as the master prophetess who was sent here to clarify Jesus Christ's word, right? And now I'm starting by campaigning against all these academics who are now acting as if though they see a place for God's law and God's teachings and God's wisdom within universities when they did absolutely nothing to contribute to the fight, which was the War of the Currents 2.0. That's the war that was fought for a period of 7 years. That war was fought. And I can name all the people who helped me in that war. And Jordan Peterson was not one of them. And Jesus Christ says, be careful about doing the right things for the wrong reasons. And so even if Jordan Peterson may have been saying the right things in certain contexts, it doesn't necessarily mean that it was for the right reason, which was glorifying God. He has not glorified God in his work, right? He's now only talking about God. You need to understand, to glorify God, this is God that we're talking about. What does it take to glorify God? The problem with Canadians, especially, we're talking about Canadians right now. The problem with Canadians is they think they have grandiose delusions. They think that they're capable of living their life without God's guidance, God's wisdom, God's teaching. So Jesus basically came and died on the cross to seal his word onto this plane so that we can benefit from it and heal from it and be rejuvenated from it and renewed and rebirthed, right? So that we can come back and live as sovereign beings with stable minds and souls that are anchored in his blood and his light. That's what he died for, right? And then he comes here, and only for what, a few thousand years later, for Canadians to come and say, oh no, we've come up with this national system that we have right now that we think works, way better than whatever God did. Like, Jesus had to die for this, right? Remember, he had to die for this system to solidify this system on this plane. And they think that whatever they have to produce is more important than whatever God has to produce and more stable. So that's the joke in and of itself, is that they don't see that that is a form of mental instability, right? Because God's our creator, and the fact that you think that someone's crazy for believing in God is proof that we are in the end times, right? Because I am an academic within the worldly realm, but I'm also a licensed PhD in the spiritual realm. Like, in the spiritual realm, I don't just run one university. I run multiple universities in the spiritual realm. Multiple. Do you understand what I'm saying? And these are intricate universities that I can't even bring these universities onto this plane of existence, because if I did, you guys would all just burn. Like, you all went crazy over FemCare Community Health Initiative, and that was an infinitesimal, glimpse of what the holy dynasty encompasses with respect to wealth and intelligence and knowledge and wisdom. And I bought that to you guys, to Canadians, to show you what this is. And you all went and you chose your own leaders, right? And leaders like Jordan Peterson have not glorified God. When I look at the people who follow Jordan Peterson, they're all blasphemous. They all hate God. Every single person that I know that is like a staunch follower of Jordan Peterson that I know hates God. And you might think, oh no, that's not me. I don't hate God. No. Trust me, to God, actions speak way louder than words. And God knows you more than you know yourself. So just because you think you don't hate God, it doesn't mean that God doesn't see that hate that you have for him. Okay, just the fact that you could wake up in the morning, sin all day, and go to sleep and feel no remorse for it, that's a form of hate. Could you imagine if your father woke up in the morning, beat your mother up all day, maybe sometimes once or twice a day, he would beat her up, right? And then at the end of that, he'd go to sleep and he didn't apologize to her. And he'd wake up the next morning and say, I don't hate her. That's the same thing you're doing to God. You're sinning, you're disobeying God all day. All day you're disobeying God, all day, all day. You go to sleep, you feel no remorse for it whatsoever, and then you want to say that you don't hate God. No, you do hate God. And you hate God a lot. And that's just one day of hate towards God, let alone that a lot of you are living your days like that all the goddamn time. Right? And so a lot of these people that follow Jordan Peterson, actually one of the people who actually the man who raped me, he was a Ukrainian man. His name was Sergei Kotovsky. He was a Ukrainian man. I reported him to Calgary police, to Detective Vicky McLellan, and she did absolutely nothing about it. She said that whatever he did didn't meet the threshold for rape, which was completely unacceptable because the evidence was there that I was raped, that the sex that took place was non-consensual, that I was unconscious at the time that the sexual activity happened. And she didn't do anything about it. And I remember this Sergei Kotovsky guy, he hated Jesus. Every time I would talk about Jesus, he'd get upset. And there was one time he said to me that we were talking about Jordan Peterson, and I was talking about how much I admire, some of his work. And he said, to me, Jordan Peterson, he saved me. To me, he's like Jesus Christ. And I just looked at him and I'm like, oof, yuck. And I was like, excuse me, no. There's nobody like Jesus Christ. I'm like, Jordan Peterson, like Jesus Christ? I'm like, just because he's done good work and just because, he might be intelligent and understand, a thing or two about psychology, does not mean that he even begins to hold a nail or a candle, to Jesus Christ. Do you see what I'm saying? So I was so offended at that. And it was shortly after that he and I, split. And nothing was done about it. And so these are the kinds of people that follow Jordan Peterson. So this is what I'm trying to say is Jordan Peterson's work doesn't glorify God. Because if Jordan Peterson's work glorified God, the people who supported his work would not be doing things like this. I can tell you, there's only a few people. I can count in less than one hand how many people truly, authentically helped me with FemCare. So if you have a crowd of people that are supporting Jordan Peterson on a regular basis, that tells me that this man is not doing what he needs to do to glorify God, especially because a lot of these followers that he has are blasphemous, are narcissistic, are rapists, right? And they now found an academic that they can attach their sins to. And Jordan Peterson agreed to take their sins on. But now I want to see, Jordan, who's going to take your sins on when Jesus Christ comes back and starts to account for all the academic, because he's coming after you guys first. He said he's coming after the teachers first. So he's coming after all the professors first. So are you ready to bear, when Jesus returns, are you ready to bear the consequences of plagiarizing his work, disrespecting his work? You basically, you know what it is? It's like what you've done is the equivalent of asking a student to write an essay and quote it in and reference it in APA format, and they hand it back to you and they reference it in MLA instead. And you would give them a big fat 0. According to university policy, you're supposed to give them a big fat 0 for improper citation because you asked for it in APA format. So it's the same with Jesus Christ. He said, if you're going to take my work and you're going to use my name, you first have to accept my blood, which means picking up your crosses and sharing in my suffering and helping me transmute that suffering into fire, light that we can now use to rebuild the kingdom. You have not gone through that process, and yet you continue to use Jesus Christ's work and mention his name in vain. And then you are now monopolizing on this platform and acting like you're some sort of victim, talking about all the benzos you were on and your addiction withdrawal, like anybody gives a fuck about that. Nobody cares. That narrative of like, oh my gosh, I'm suffering, look at me, it's over. It's completely over. If your suffering does not glorify Jesus Christ, nobody cares. There are tons of people your story is like, it's a dime a dozen. Your story means absolutely nothing. The question is, how did you use your story to glorify God? And so far, I don't see how your suffering has glorified God. I can show you how my suffering has glorified God. You couldn't do that. And this is why I'm saying that you, even as an academic, a lot of your wisdom, a lot of what you're teaching, although I respected it at a time, it is becoming irrelevant now because we're ushering in God's kingdom. And it appears that the work that you have done did not prepare for this new paradigm that's coming in, and it didn't do anything to rebuild the kingdom. Because I'm ready. When the kingdom comes, I'm ready to start like actually materializing, buildings, stadiums, universities, healthcare centers, community care centers. Like I'm ready, right? It's just you guys who keep stealing the stage and the spotlight to push your mediocrity that is, like I said, irrelevant and doesn't matter anymore, and it's not going to push us forward. But you need to stay relevant for whatever reason, right? I'm waiting for you guys to just be gone, and then we can finally rebuild this world, right? So that's how I feel about Jordan Peterson right now. It's unfortunate because, like I said, I learned a lot from him. But for me now, learning a lot from you is not enough because I learned a lot from my father and I don't owe him anything. You see what I'm saying? So learning from somebody is not enough. It's, did you share in my suffering when I was trying to save science in Canada? I sacrificed everything to save science, to save law, to save righteousness, to save law and order. These values, these concepts of civility, what makes a civilization great. I laid my life on the line to protect these values because I knew that that was what was necessary, and I didn't get any support in return. None. And I haven't been able to share my story either. So what I'm saying, I'm doing this video to say, I don't care, Jordan Peterson, about your drug addiction and your depression and how terrible it was. And I don't care about any of that. It doesn't matter to me. Right? It doesn't matter to me. It's like, okay, you're just like another statistic, basically. All right? So I will, I guess, see you guys all again next time. All right? And until then, stay awake and aware and relevant.